knowledge, who has the judgment, who has the clarity of vision and strength of resolve to keep this country safe. That is what this debate is all about, and I would suggest let's stay focused on those issues rather than just attacks directed at each other.
I think the questions were about issues, but Senator Rubio,
I was mentioned
what would you like to say?
Yes, sir. As well by Senator
First of all,
Cruz. I'd like to respond.
do I go? Let me go first, and then you can please recognize Rand after. But first of all, thank you.
Marco.
First of all, don't worry, I'm not leaving the stage no matter what you ask me.
Good.
And second of all, and I think, you know, Governor Jeb, the attack, the authorization that Barack Obama asked for was not against ISIS. It was against Assad. And John Kerry described it as attacks that would be unbelievably small. I don't think the United States should be engaged in symbolic military activity. So it was not against ISIS, it was against Assad. I think the United States military is already operating under rules of engagement that are too strict and that do not allow us to pursue victory. When I'm president, that will change.
Chris,
Senator Paul, go ahead.
Thank you. The issue in Syria is a very important one, and it's one we need to get right. The question is, should we be bombing both sides of the war? Some want to topple Assad. In fact, they want to bomb ISIS and Assad simultaneously. I think that's a really, really bad idea. In fact, I've said for several years that arming the allies of ISIS will make the situation worse. That what we really need to do is defeat ISIS, but if you defeat Assad, what you will wind up with is a larger and more powerful ISIS that occupies that space. You may well see an ISIS that takes over all of Syria.
Chris.
There was a question about foreign policy, by the way, and experience, and I thought if I didn't jump in, I might not be able to tell everybody this. I think they'd want to hear it. Look, I served on...
We'll be talking about foreign policy a little bit later. We're going to talk...
We have a lot to cover, but we want to turn the page to domestic terror.
But wait a minute. The only reason is...
Because we want to turn the page to domestic terror, and let me tell you why. We're partnering with Google on this debate, and they're telling us that their search results have gone through the roof.
I always listen to you, Megan. Go ahead.
You're a good man, Governor Kasich.
Yes. Thank you.
The search results, the searches for terror issues, for safety issues in America have gone through the roof, increased over 400% since 2008. People are worried. They're worried about what's happening in the country and about a domestic terror attack, as all of you know. Now, in combating this threat, Senator Rubio, you've advocated closing down mosques. We'll get back to you. You have advocated closing down mosques, diners, any place where radicalization is occurring. You told me that. But the Supreme Court has made clear that hateful speech is generally protected by the First Amendment. In other words, radical Muslims have the right to be radical Muslims unless they turn to terror. Doesn't your position run afoul of the First Amendment?
Megan, that's the problem. Radical Muslims and radical Islam is not just hate talk, it's hate action. They blow people up. Look what they did in San Bernardino. Look at the attack they inspired in Philadelphia that the White House still refuses to link to terror, where a guy basically shot a police officer 3 times. He told the police, I did it because I was inspired by ISIS. And to this day, the White House still refuses to acknowledge that it had anything to do with terror. Look, the threat we face from ISIS is unprecedented. There has never been a jihadist group like this. They have affiliates in over a dozen countries now. They are the best-funded radical jihadist group in the history of the world, and they have shown a sophisticated understanding of the laws of other countries on how to insert fighters into places, and they are actively plotting to attack us here at home and around the world. We must keep America safe from this threat. And yes, when I am President of the United States, if there is some place in this country where radical jihadists are planning to attack the United States, we will go after them wherever they are, and if we capture them alive, they are going to Guantanamo.
Senator Paul, do you agree with that? We're going to close down mosques, we're going to close down diners.
I think that's a huge mistake to be closing down mosques. But I would say that if you want to defend the country, it begins with border security. And this is where I've had my disagreement with Senator Rubio. When he brought forward the Gang of 8 bill to give citizenship to those who came here illegally, I put forward an amendment that says we should have more scrutiny on those who are coming as students, those who are coming as immigrants, those who are coming as refugees. Because we'd had 2 refugees come to my town in Bowling Green and try to attack us. Marco opposed this because they made a deal. He made a deal with Chuck Schumer that he would oppose any conservative amendments. And I think that's a mistake, and I just don't think Marco can have it both ways. You can't be in favor of defending us against Islam, radical Islam, if you're not for border security.
Might I respond? The first thing, I don't don't know of anyone who's not in favor of fully vetting people that are trying to come to this country other than perhaps Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. I think we all support that. Rand's amendment was not the right way to do it. I do believe that people who are trying to come to the United States, this country has a right to know who they are and why they are coming. And that's why I've been very clear. When I am the President of the United States of America, we don't know who you are, and we don't know why you're trying to come to the United States, you are not going to get in. Because the radical threat that we now face from ISIS is extraordinary and unprecedented. And when I'm president, we are keeping ISIS out of America.
Governor Christie, let's talk about profiling. In December,
Talk about what?
Profiling. In December, 2 radical Muslims killed 14 people in San Bernardino, California. Neighbors of the terrorists said that they did not report the couple to law enforcement prior to the crime because they were afraid that they would be accused of profiling. Now, you have said that we should not profile. How do you square that with the San Bernardino case?
Well, because you can do it without profiling, Megan. You do it on the facts. What those folks knew was that these folks had weapons. They knew that they were talking about trying to take our country and attack it. That's not profiling. That's law enforcement. And that's the difference between somebody who knows how to do this and somebody who's never done it before.
They didn't know they were going to attack the country.
They knew they were talking about the issues of attacking people, Megan. They knew that.
That's not true. The neighbors said they saw men going in and out of the garage. They saw packages being delivered. They saw Muslims. And they did not think that was enough to call the cops. Do you?
Yeah, well, listen, I think that what people should do is use their common sense. And the fact is, let law enforcement make those decisions. I've told people that from the time I was U.S. Attorney 13 years ago. It's not for them to make those decisions about whether or not something is legal or illegal or profiling or not. You see something that's suspicious, you call law enforcement and let law enforcement make those decisions. That's what should be done. That can be done. It can be done without profiling people. What that is just common sense. They thought something was wrong. And here's the problem in this country right now. The problem is that Barack Obama has made law enforcement the enemy. Hillary Clinton has made law enforcement the enemy. We're not supporting our law enforcement officers. It's making everybody nervous to get out of their cars. If you're a law enforcement officer, it's making people in neighborhoods nervous to go to law enforcement. As president, I will support law enforcement, and we will stop radical terrorist attacks in this country by supporting our intelligence community and our law enforcement community.
Dr. Carson. This week, a female Muslim who served in the U.S. Air Force asked Hillary Clinton a question. She asked whether the United States is still the best place in which to raise her 3 Muslim children, given what she perceives as a rise in Islamophobia in this country. Do you think that the GOP messaging on Muslims has stoked the flames of bias on this, as the Democrats suggest? And how would you answer this veteran?
Well, I don't know about the GOP messaging, but I can tell you about my messaging. You know, we need to stop allowing political correctness to dictate our policies, because it's going to kill us if we don't. And, you know, in the Holy Land Foundation trial in 2006 in Texas, you know, they had a memorandum, an explanatory memorandum, that talked about the fact that Americans would be easy to overcome and to commit civilization jihad because they were going to be trying to protect the rights of the very people who were trying to subvert them. But, you know, I believe in the Teddy Roosevelt philosophy. Teddy Roosevelt said, we are a nation of immigrants. As such, everybody is welcome from any race, any country, any religion, if they want to be Americans, if they want to accept our values and our laws. If not, they can stay where they are.
Governor Kasich, see, I'm back. You appeared to back, in another debate, a so-called backdoor to encrypted cell phone technology, which protects most smartphones that we all have from hacking. And it includes our phones, and it also protects the cell phones of the terrorists. Now, the tech companies and a group of MIT scientists, smart guys, right, warn that if they create a way for the FBI to have a backdoor into our encrypted communications, then the bad guys will exploit it too. And they say that this is going to cause more security problems than it would solve for everyday Americans. Are they wrong?
Well, look, the Joint Terrorism Task Forces need resources and they need tools, and those are made up of the FBI, state, and local law enforcement. And Megan, it's best not to talk anymore about backdoors and encryption. It'll get solved, but it needs to be solved in the Situation Room of the White House with the technology folks.
Public testimony.
Yeah, but I just have to tell you that it's best with some of these things not be said. Now, I want to go back to something. See, I was there when Reagan rebuilt the military. I was there in '89 when the wall came tumbling down because we were strong. And I was there when we went in the Gulf War, and we didn't win that war just from the air. We won that war by assembling a group of Arab leaders who stood in the Rose Garden and stood with America. We want to destroy ICE. It has to be in the air and on the ground. It has to be with our friends in the Arab world and our friends in Europe, the coalition that we had when we went to the first Gulf War. And then when we win that, and we will win that against ISIS as it settles down, we should leave, because we shouldn't be policemen of the world. But what we need to do is turn it over to the regional powers to be able to handle that. But we have a unique time in America to connect with people all around the world that understand that there's an existential threat against all of them. The Arabs, the Jordanians, the Saudis, the Egyptians, our friends in Europe, and including the Turks. So we have a unique opportunity to bring everybody together. I saw Reagan do it. I've seen other presidents do it. And frankly, if you want to be commander-in-chief, you have to have the experience. At the same time we're doing all that, the Pentagon must be reformed so we get what we need for our men and women in uniform. All of that together, we're going to be just fine, and America is going to continue to lead the world.
Governor, thank you.
Governor Bush, just today, a Wounded Warrior organization designed to help wounded veterans and their families is coming under fire for raising tens of millions of dollars, but spending almost half of that on travel and hotels and dinners and luxury, lavish conferences. So taking care of veterans is obviously a huge issue in the country that has asked so many to serve and sacrifice so much. If you were president, would you police these charity organizations that say they're helping vets?
Of course, and there's all sorts of ways that can be done at the state, local, and federal level to do that. But the first duty of the next President of the United States is to fix the mess in the Department of Veterans Affairs. That's his first responsibility. Look, we have waiting lists for veterans that are leaving because of the sequester, where we're gutting the military. More and more military personnel are leaving, becoming veterans, and the waiting list grows. They've given out $140 million of bonuses to Veterans Department employees, including reducing the waiting list without giving veterans care. People died, and only 3 people have been fired. I will make sure that we fire the sheer incompetence inside the Department of Veterans Affairs, and that we'll give veterans a choice card so that they don't have to travel hours and hours to get care if they want to go to their private provider. You want to make the Veterans Administration do a better job? Give veterans choices, and you'll get a much better result. And as it relates to all the other organizations, let me give you a good example. In Houston, Texas, there's an organization in place because someone acted on their heart, wanted to make sure that there's no homeless veterans in Houston. And they've come pretty close to that without federal government assistance. We need to mobilize the entire country to deal with our veterans and treat them with much more respect than they get today.
Governor Bush, thank you. Speaking of veterans, we have a question from a veteran who is one of the top YouTube creators. Over the course of the evening, gentlemen, we will hear from some of YouTube's most followed stars. And here's one of them.
I'm Mark Watson. I'm known for my tech reviews on YouTube, but I'm also a veteran who served in the Army for 8 years. As an African American living near Ferguson, I've seen the strain between police officers and the communities they serve firsthand. Now, there are great tools like body cameras that can protect both officers and citizens, but we all currently have better cameras in our pockets than in our precincts. Why aren't we using the technology available to better protect our communities?
Senator Paul, that question to you.
You know, I've supported legislation to allow body cameras. I've been to Ferguson. I've been trying to look for solutions to our criminal justice problem. One thing I discovered in Ferguson was that a third of the budget for the city of Ferguson was being reaped by civil fines. People were just being fined to death. Now, you and I and many of the people in this audience, if we get a $100 fine, we can survive it. If you're living on the edge of poverty, you get a $100 fine or your car towed, a lot of times you lose your job. I also think the war on drugs has disproportionately affected our African American community, and what we need to do is make sure that the war on drugs is equal protection under the law and that we don't unfairly incarcerate another generation of young African American males. In Ferguson, for every 100 African American women, there are only 60 African American men. Drug use is about equal between white and black, but our prisons, 3 out of 4 people in prison are black or brown. I think something has to change. I think it's a big thing that our party needs to be part of, and I've been a leader in Congress on trying to bring about criminal justice reform.
Senator Paul, thank you. This
debate is just getting started. Coming up, the role of the federal government. But first, join tonight's conversation right from your home. Go to Google.com or open your Google search app and search Fox News Debate to vote on which issue is most important to you in this election. More from the Iowa Event Center and the Republican presidential debate in a moment.
Welcome back, everybody. We are live in Des Moines, Iowa, and let's get right back to the questions. Brett?
Thank you, Megan. Gentlemen, I'll ask you some questions about federal spending and the role of the federal government. Everybody always says they want to cut federal spending, and usually they start by saying they'll cut waste, fraud, and abuse, but that really doesn't ever materialize. We all know that. Governor Christie, you talk a lot about entitlement reform, and you say that that's where the federal government can get savings needed to balance the budget. But can you name even one thing that the federal government does now that it should not do at all?
Yeah. You want one?
I want one.
Yeah. How about one that I've done in New Jersey for the last 6 years, and that's get rid of Planned Parenthood funding for the United States of America.
Anything bigger than that?
Bigger than that? Let me tell you something. When you see thousands upon thousands upon thousands of children being murdered in the womb, I can't think of anything bigger than that.
Thank you, Governor. I realize everyone on this stage opposes Obamacare, and you're not alone. Google data shows that in the last month, when people searched policy repeals, that there were a lot of them. Obamacare took the top 2 spots. But today there are millions of people who gained health insurance from Obamacare, and they now rely on it. So the question, Senator Cruz, if you repeal Obamacare, as you say you will, Will you be fine if millions of those people don't have health insurance? And what is your specific plan for covering the uninsured?
Sure. Well, let's take it one at a time. First of all, we have seen now in 6 years of Obamacare that it's been a disaster. It is the biggest job killer in this country. Millions of Americans have lost their jobs, have been forced into part-time work, have lost their health insurance, have lost their doctors, have seen their premiums skyrocket. If I am elected president, we will repeal every word of Obamacare. Now, once that is done, everyone agrees we need health care reform. It should follow the principles of expanding competition, empowering patients, and keeping government from getting in between us and our doctors. 3 specific reforms that reflect those principles. Number 1, we should allow people to purchase health insurance across state lines. That'll create a true 50-state national marketplace which will drive down the cost of low-cost, catastrophic health insurance. Number 2, we should expand health savings accounts so people can save in a tax-advantaged way for more routine health care needs. And number 3, we should work to de-link health insurance from employment, so if you lose your job, your health insurance goes with you, and it is personal, portable, and affordable. And I'll tell you, Brad, I think that's a much more attractive vision for health care than the Washington-driven, top-down Obamacare that is causing so many millions of people to hurt.
Senator Cruz, thank you. Governor Bush, you've advocated for statehood for Puerto Rico. The Puerto Rican economy is collapsing under unsustainable debt burden. Only about 1 million of its 4 million residents are currently employed. So should American citizens who you say are already overtaxed bail out Puerto Rico as well?
No, they shouldn't, and I believe that Puerto Rico ought to have the right of self-determination. If I was a Puerto Rican, I'd vote for statehood so that they have full citizenship. They serve in the military. They would have to pay federal taxes. They would accept the responsibilities of full U.S. citizenship, but they should have the right of self-determination. Before you get to that, though, Puerto Rico is going to have to deal with the structural problems they face. You know, it's a fact that if you can pay for $79 one-way ticket to Orlando and you can escape the challenges of a declining economy and high crime rates, you move to Orlando. And a lot of people are doing that, and the spiraling out of control requires Puerto Rico to make structural reforms. Federal government can play a role in allowing them to do that, but they should not. The process of statehood or the status of Puerto Rico won't be solved until we get to the bigger issue of how you deal with the structural economic problems they're facing right now.
Governor Kasich, you're one of 2 remaining sitting governors still in the race. Your colleague, Governor Rick Snyder in Michigan, is under fire, he and his administration, for the Flint, Michigan water crisis and the botched response to it. How would you have handled that?
Well, you got to be on top of it right away. And, you know, I don't know all the details of what Rick Snyder has done. I know there have been people who have been fired, people who are being held accountable. But the fact is, every single engine of government has to move when you see a crisis like that. And I've had many situations in the state of Ohio where we've had to move, whether it's storms, whether it was a horrible school shooting. There are many crises that come. A water crisis in Toledo. You've got to be on top of it. You've got to go the extra mile. You've got to work with local communities, and you've got to work with the federal government, because you realize that people are depending on you. And so you go the extra mile, but people have to be alert. They have to be alert to problems, and when you see a problem, you must act quickly to get on top of it. And people at home are saying they've got a problem, listen to them, because most of the time they're absolutely correct. So the fact is that we work for the people don't work for us, and we have to have an attitude when we're in government of servanthood. That's what really matters. We serve you, you don't serve us. We listen to you, and then we act.
Senator Rubio, on the issue of climate change, in 2008, you wanted Florida to get ahead of other states and establish a cap-and-trade system, a program for carbon emissions, which many Republicans thought at the time would hurt the Florida economy. Now you're a skeptic of climate change science, and in fact you warn that federal efforts to fight climate change will cost U.S. jobs and hurt the U.S. economy. So why the change?
Well, Brett, first, that's not entirely the story. At the time, the liberal governor of Florida, who claimed he was a Republican, his name was Charlie Crist, he wanted to impose cap and trade on Florida, and I opposed him. I was the first person out of the box that opposed him on it. And then we saw that the leading candidates for president at the time, both the Republican and the Democrats, all supported it. And what we said is, if they're going to impose this on us, we better prepare to protect the state from it. But I have never supported cap and trade, and I never thought it was a good idea. And I was clear about that at the time. And I do not believe it's a good idea now. I do not believe that we have to destroy our economy in order to protect our environment. And especially with these programs are asking us to pass that will do nothing to help the environment, but will be devastating for our economy. When I am President of the United States of America, there will never be any cap and trade in the United States.
Thanks, Senator.
All right, we're going to move on because coming up, immigration and something you've never seen before. Stay tuned right after this break. Live in Des Moines, Iowa, and now we move on to the topic of immigration. Senator Rubio, we start with you. When you ran for Senate in 2010, you made clear that you opposed legalization and citizenship for illegal immigrants. You promised repeatedly that you would oppose it as a U.S. Senator as well. Here are just a few examples. Watch.
Never support, never have, and never will support any effort to grant blanket legalization amnesty to folks who have entered or stayed in this country illegally.
First of all, earned path to citizenship is basically code for amnesty. It's what they call it. And the reality of it is this.
It is unfair to the people that have legally entered this country to create an alternative pathway for individuals who entered illegally and knowingly did so. You cannot grant amnesty. If the American people see us grant amnesty, they will never again believe in legal immigration. They will never again support it. And that's wrong for our country, bad for our future.
Within 2 years of getting elected, you were co-sponsoring legislation to create a path to citizenship. In your words, amnesty. Haven't you already proven that you cannot be trusted on this issue?
No, because if you look at the quote, and it's very specific, and it says blanket amnesty. I do not support blanket amnesty.
But you went on
I do
from
not support amnesty.
You said more than that, sir.
No, I said I do not support blanket
You
legalization.
said earned path to citizenship is basically code for amnesty. You supported earned path to citizenship.
It absolutely has been. And at the time, in the context of that, was in 2009 and 2010, where the last effort for legalization was an effort done in the Senate. It was an effort led by several people that provided almost an instant path with very little obstacles moving forward. What I've always said is this issue does need to be solved. They've been talking about this issue for 30 years, and nothing ever happens. And I'm going to tell you exactly how we're going to deal with it when I am president. Number one, we're going to keep ISIS out of America. If we don't know who you are or why you're coming, you will not get into the United States. Number two, we are going to enforce our immigration laws. I am the son and the grandson of immigrants, and I know that securing our borders is not anti-immigrant, and we will do it. We will hire 20,000 new border agents instead of 20,000 new IRS agents. We will finish the 700 miles of fencing and walls our nation needs. We'll have mandatory E-Verify, a mandatory entry-exit